In the meantime, though, the debate over Australia Day continues to ramp up, doesn't it? It just won't go away. Already a handful of local councils in Victoria and WA have voted to do away with Australia Day, arguing it's not representative of the whole community. Now, to their credit, the Adelaide City Council has voted to shelve the issue, but not so the Marion Council. Councillor Bruce Hull has put a motion to Council that Australia Day events should be moved to another day. Here's what he said to 5AA Breakfast this morning.
All we're simply doing, and most reasonable Australians would actually agree with this, that the 26th of January is probably not the right day if we're really serious about reconciliation.
So hang on, I've got to pick up on that straight away. Most reasonable Australians would agree with that. How do you know that?
Oh, well, I've been around for a while, Pembo, like you have. You know, I first got elected to the Marion Council in 1993.
But the fact that you've been around for a while, does not translate to an exhaustive poll of community sentiment?
Well, I keep getting elected, Pembo.
Did you tell people when you ran last time that you wanted to get rid of January 26?
No.
I'm not asking these questions as some sort of redneck who's indifferent to the concerns that Indigenous Australians have about the date. But if this is going to be democratic, you've got to go to the people first, surely. Look,
the people will be happy to celebrate Australia Day. And look, I think that it's starting to come through that a lot of people are not really that concerned about what day it's held on.
Well, there you go. What are your thoughts? 8223 0000. That was Councillor Bruce Hull from the Marion Council, putting a motion before Council to get rid of Australia Day as far as that council is concerned. Joining me in the studio is Premier Jay Weatherall. Premier, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Great
Good to see you. What's your view of this debate? Is this an area that local councils should be getting involved in, or should they butt out?
Oh, look, I'm relaxed about their expressing their point of view, but it's a matter for the national government. I mean, there are much bigger issues at stake in terms of the relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australia. And it's not, I don't think it's one of these things that you just impose on a piecemeal basis. I mean, if there is to be a new settlement between us and Aboriginal Australia, and I think a lot of people want that, there are lots of symbolic ways in which that's been advanced, whether it's a treaty, whether it's been changes to our constitution, flag, all of those things which maybe could mark a new beginning. But it has to be dealt with on a national basis, and there has to be, the benefit of this is a consensus. Like, what you want is the community as a whole to say, here's the new deal for our relationship with Aboriginal Australia. And you can't do that just by one council picking off an issue, and which is calculated to get people's backs up. There'll be strong feelings, and you'll actually, I think, cause the opposite to occur. You won't get reconciliation. What you'll get is disunity and fighting, and that surely isn't where we want to be on this question, because it's not going to change anything substantial, changing the date. But it will get a lot of people's backs up if you introduce a debate like that outside of this bigger national debate.
And look what we've seen with the same-sex marriage debate. Exactly that. Yeah.
Exactly.
More
I think
decisive.
you want... I mean, that's a sort of, I suppose, a different issue in a way, because it's just simply a question of rights. But this won't even change that. It's really an expression of sentiment. Much like the constitutional changes are, they're an expression of sentiment. But, for that to be valuable, it really has to be the product of a national consensus, and I just think this almost undermines a national consensus.
Now, the councils in WA, there's one in WA and a couple in Victoria, have actually passed this bill, and the federal government immediately withdrew their right to hold citizenship ceremonies, but also the state governments have condemned them.
Yeah.
If this happens in Marion, let's assume that it won't, but if it does, what action would you take?
Well, I don't think we have any direct control over it. I think you'll find the Commonwealth are the ones that confer the right to have citizenship ceremonies. But
would you condemn the government saying the council?
I don't agree with it. I don't think it's the right way to go. But I think the Commonwealth are the ones that give you the licence, if you like, to conduct citizenship ceremonies. So it'll be the ball will be in their court. But yeah, I don't know why you'd throw this ball in the air. It's the classic barbecue stopper on a day when we're all having a barbecue. I don't know whether I'd be doing that.
Yeah. Well, look, let's move to another issue affecting local councils.
Yeah.
Your Fund My Neighbourhood program.
Yeah.
$40 million.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big bucket of cash that you're offering. How did this come about, and why are you doing it?
Well, it really builds on the back of some successful participatory budgeting things we've been doing. So we had this Fund My Idea and Fund My Community. So when we go out to a country cabinet, we have this scheme where the community gets to vote on a $50,000 bucket of money for a local project. And so we don't determine it. The ideas come from locals and they're voted on by locals. And it's been incredibly successful. In fact, we won a United Nations award for transparency and budgeting through that process just this year. So when we go out as members of parliament, almost invariably the things that get raised with us are what you might call in colloquial terms local government issues. But then you ask local government about it and they say, well, we don't have the resources to deal with it. So it falls between local government and state government. And so what we decided to do is say, well, how do we get around that? And so we thought we'd create this fund where locals who know what's needed in their neighbourhood can determine what happens. So basically anyone over 18 can put an idea up. For it to go to the next step, you need a sponsoring organisation, so an NGO, a council, a sporting club, Rotary Club, whatever, because they're the ones that have to get the money if it's successful. But then in your area, and there's 4 in the metro and 11 in the country, you get a vote. And the idea that gets the most votes wins. But it's sort of, we've separated it into a range of sort of areas for people to look at. So they're basically the sort of things you'd expect. Things like upgrades to community halls, neighbourhood centres, community gardens, beautification upgrades of playground areas, pedestrian safety, crossings, lighting. That's a big one. Dog runs, things like that. So between $10,000 and $150,000, that's the area we're pitching it at, and you can all have a crack. And it's been
for
amazing.
example, if I had tennis courts or a park over the road from my house, I could actually go to the council and say, I would like lighting put up on these tennis courts so we can play night tennis.
Yep.
The council would then give that a tick and then they would act on our behalf?
Yeah,
or do I have to do it?
Might even be just the tennis club. If the tennis club's an incorporated association, you might just do it through them. If it's on council land, obviously there's a bit of a filtering exercise. The council needs to be happy with it. But we've had 950 people already submit an idea or log in at least, and then 450 have actually gone the next step to submit the idea. And we've still got until the 8th of September.
Okay. Look, if you've got an idea in mind, give us a call, 8223 0000, and you can run it past the Premier and you can give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down now. We can bypass the process. No, not really. But he can give you an idea.
Well, it's not down to me. See, the thing is it's down to the locals. They'll just vote on it.
Who does vote?
Just the neighbourhood. Okay. So to give you some idea of the examples that have been submitted, Crystalbrook Netball Club has submitted an application to upgrade the lights of the netball and basketball courts. The South Gawler Football Club have applied to build a shelter with a barbecue and some seating areas for spectators. And there's also a proposal to install a rain shelter over the disabled waiting area at the Croydon train station. So they're the type of things, not massive, but not somewhere in the middle, if you like. And they're sort of things that people have been thinking about, probably haven't been able to get local government to do, and they're a bit small traditionally for state government to do.
What about the cynics who would say, look, this is the stuff you should be doing as a government anyway, you shouldn't be farming this out in the way you're doing so? Well,
in a way, it's sort of neighbourhood infrastructure which might have traditionally fallen into the local government area. But, there are things that just aren't being done, and local governments say, well, look, we can't afford it. Or they might think, well, if we do it here, we've got to do it for every part of and they might have their own, budgets and plans. And we just kept getting all these dealt with requests, and we thought, well, how can we do this? And so we had a successful program. We just thought, well, look, we'll take it to the next level. 8223 0000 if you want to put your 2 bob worth in. What about, though, the fact that while these minor, slight, in comparative terms, smaller projects will get completed out of this, the bigger ones that the local councils really want to take on, they still haven't got the funding for? Oh, well, look, local government have got their own rate base. You know, they can raise their own revenue from their ratepayers to do things like local roads, rubbish, the things that their big civic centres that they're traditionally associated with. I suppose what we're doing is just looking at it's the glue that holds neighbourhoods together. These sporting clubs are often run by volunteers. They have a bit of trouble with the chook raffles getting, sufficient money together. A little bit of money can go a long way, because often what you'll do is you'll trigger the local tradesperson that will come in and help out. So you unlock a lot of value with a little bit of dough. And it's good for local jobs, because almost, without exception, almost 100% of this is all local employment, because you're talking about the local tradie and those types of things.
We're talking to the Premier Jay Weatherill about Fund My Neighbourhood program, a $40 million initiative. Give us a call if you've got a view, 8223 0000. And it's 10 minutes away from 2. Great to have your company. We're talking to the Premier, Jay Weatherill. He's with us in the studio at the moment. Happy to take your calls if you want to have a conversation. 8223 0000. We're talking about the Fund My Neighbourhood program, and if you've got any ideas for this great program, it's a $40 million initiative where basically we, as members of the public, can make a submission to... I know what the submission I'm going to make, Premier, by the way. I've got one in the back of my mind already.
Yeah.
I do live opposite a park, and the swing squeaks like buggery. So 4 o'clock in the morning, when the youngies are over there squeaking on the swing, I need some funding to put some grease on that bolt.
Just go over and stick some oil on it.
Yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I? Listen, the Fund My Neighbourhood program, $40 million pot of cash, as I said. Just run us through again the process. So I have an idea.
Yeah.
Where do I go from there?
Okay, so it's $20 million in 2 stages. So we're doing the first stage, $20 million round 1. Applications close on the 8th of September. So the first phase is the ideas phase. So you put an idea in.
Mm-hmm.
In your case, you need a new swing or a can of oil.
Yeah, can of grease.
Can of grease. Then there's a verification phase. So from the 11th of September, we'll work through whether the ideas meet the test. So it'll be things like, are they the type of project that meets the criteria we've set down, which is neighbourhood infrastructure. It might be, in that case, it might be too small, so that might be ruled out as something. And we're talking about $10,000 to $150,000, generally speaking.
Okay, so that wipes out my squeaky swing.
It might be a council swing, and so we'd consult with council about that, and so they'd say, well, are you cool with us running a Fund My Neighbourhood idea around something that's to do with your piece of infrastructure? And they'd say yes or no. And then the next step would be the community voting phase. So later this year, the idea would be put up and people would vote, and it will be the neighbourhood around that idea that would vote. And there might be competing ideas, for instance, and we hope there is, so that there's a choice. And then the one with the most votes will be announced as the winner later this year. Okay,
so it really is a competitive process as far as who gets the nod at the grassroots level.
Exactly, and we might have our own view about what we think people want, but you don't really get to test that except through this sort of process. And, something might look worthy, but it might be that a lot of people don't think it's as important as something else. I mean, it is surprising that the number of playgrounds actually has been interesting. A lot of playgrounds being put up, which might just mean that, there's a much bigger demand for that. And parents, the difference between getting in a car and going, a long distance and bundling the kids out again, there's a lot of difference between that and just rolling the pram down or to the corner. And it might be the difference between using the playground or not. And that, they're things you don't necessarily... You might think, there are plenty of playgrounds in this area, but you don't necessarily think about the life of a busy parent and how difficult it is to, to load and unload the car, especially if you've got twins or, 3 under 3, 3 under 5 or something. And that's not uncommon. I mean, you do see that.
8223 0000 if you want to have a word to the Premier or ask him a question about this. Is it a case of, this is not just peculiar to your government, but I think because of the concentration of population within South Australia, we've always, regardless of the colour of the government, we've always had the reputation of, Adelaide effectively stops beyond Jepps Cross, or a little bit beyond in more recent years, but regions have been neglected. This is an ideal opportunity for the regions to get very firmly involved, isn't it?
Look, it's the propaganda, like that, because we're a Labor government, we don't have many seats in the regions except for Whyalla. That's said about us, but, I'd say all evidence to the contrary. I mean, we're, in fact, over the last, a lot of the period of time I've been in government, the first thing I did was negotiate the River Murray deal, Murray-Darling Basin Agreement, which I don't think has been a bigger achievement in the last sort of 16 years. And then, of course, we've basically saved the Upper Spencer Gulf with, Arium, that fantastic new deal for the steelworks, Port Augusta with the solar thermal project, and of course, Nearstar. Saving the smelter. So, I'd argue that we've been a great government for the regions. But, it is true that because we're not seen as a government of the country, we have to work harder to gain people's confidence. One of the reasons we've got Jeff Brock in the cabinet, he's actually made sure that he holds our feet to the fire on the whole question of regions. So where this actually came from was our country cabinets. So it was the country cabinets that had our Fund My Community thing, which is the $50,000 scheme. And that was so successful that it ended up winning this UN award, and we've used that as the template for something for the whole state. So it is an opportunity for the regions. 11 basically regional areas can compete. There are 4 in the city, and what we're notionally sort of carving out the 20 million is about $11.70 per resident. So you aggregate that, and that'll give you some idea of what can be spent in a particular region.
Now, March, let's move on to the future. March is the election. We haven't even got a budget through yet. Where are we sitting there?
Well, traditionally you don't get the budget through till about September, October. There's usually a debate that spans the long break.
Yeah, but we don't traditionally have the opposition saying, no, this is not going anywhere.
Absolutely. I mean, it is an extraordinary thing. The opposition are blocking our budget, principally because of the bank levy. The bank levy, though, of course, funds the $200 million Future Jobs Fund, the $15,000 Jobs Accelerator grant if you put on an apprentice, and also the lowest payroll tax for small business in the nation. So, there's no magic money. You've got to, if you're going to spend money, unless you want to worsen the deficit, you've got to actually find it somewhere else. We've taxed the 5 biggest banks, 1/3 of 1%. And before people cry a river of tears for the banks, when Commonwealth Bank the other week decided to hand back their bonuses for their executives, they saved $26 million. Our bank levy on Commonwealth Bank, $22 million. So, it came out of, and the poor old chief executive's now going to have to live on $6 million per annum for his salary. So I don't think anyone's, shedding a tear there for the banks. And they can afford it. They've said they can afford it. And, what politics, government's about choices. We had to choose, do we impose burdens on citizens, or do we find revenue to do the things we need to do?
But they argue that you are imposing it on the citizens because they're the shareholders and the customers.
Well, the shareholders will have to accept a marginally smaller profit.
But as a customer, I'm going to have to. It will get passed on to me.
It can't be passed on to the customer. And here's the evidence of why it can't be passed on. Why are the banks screaming? Have you ever seen them worried about passing on anything in the past? They're happy to pass on every single cost in fees. The reason they're screaming is they know it can't be passed on, and it's going to come out of profits.
Isn't it also part of they're hoping to shut down the precedent of you actually getting this through and it rolling out through the rest of the country? I mean, WA has already expressed a bit of an interest, and I'm sure others will follow.
What they're trying to do is to make an example of us and to frighten everybody else away from doing it. It's as simple as that.
What about Business SA joining the campaign?
Well, Business SA have decided to privilege 5 of their members, the 5 banks, over the other tens of thousands of members or thousands of members of their organisation, because we're not pocketing this money. It goes straight out the door back to small and medium-sized businesses. I mean, that's how our $200 million jobs fund is funded. It's how our rebate for putting on a new apprentice is funded, and it's how our reduction in payroll tax is funded. I mean, what they've got to ask themselves is not just whether they like the idea of a new levy, but they've got to ask themselves, do they like the expenditure that we're making, and have they made a judgment about whether they support. It's as though they say, "Oh, look, we're happy for you to spend the money. We just don't want you to raise the revenue." Well, how does that work? I mean, so we're going to have a worsening deficit, or you don't want us to spend the money? I mean, these are the real-world choices, not these fantasy choices that exist in the fevered imagination of, some people.
So how frustrating is it for you heading into an election in March? It's creeping up. We're in August. We're almost at the end of August, so it's not far away. To wake up every day, open up the paper and turn on the television every night and see these ads saying, business confidence is at a rock bottom, the thing. Given how many announcements you've made, and I'm not being political here, how many announcements you've made about the economy of South Australia picking up over the last, 4 weeks?
That's right.
You've had a pretty good run over the last 4 weeks.
The last 2 months, you look at it, we've had the biggest battery in the world up there at Jamestown. We've had the solar thermal plant in Port Augusta, biggest in the world. We've had Arium, rescued by a billionaire, investing money there. We've had the announcement of the Adelaide Casino building the 5-star hotel there on the site. We've seen China Southern go from 3 flights, announced from going 3 flights a week to 5 nights flights a week. These are votes of confidence, and we've also had the fantastic opening up of the Northern Adelaide irrigation scheme, with the Commonwealth Government kicking in now to open up basically a whole new food bowl out there at 2 Wells. I mean, these are all incredibly positive signs about the future of the South Australian economy. We've got some jokers out there telling us that we're actually going backwards. I mean, the banks themselves, the National Australia Bank survey has business confidence up. We have also the ANZ Stateometer has got one of only a few states that are actually, our economy is growing and accelerating, as opposed to other states. I mean, these are very positive things, and I think most people will look at those full-page ads and think the banks have got a lot of money to throw around, and that's our point.
All right. Look, one thing, can I make a request?
Sure.
It's not under the Fund My Neighbourhood program. Can you do something about the barge in the River Torrens, please, outside the festival
You
centre?
don't like the look of that?
Ugly. What do you think?
Well, it's not great, is it? But I think there are a few ideas. I don't know where council are up to over that, but
they've caved in.
Done?
They've left it there. It's going to be there for 2 more years.
We might have to pretty it up a bit.
I think you need to. Premier, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Good on you.
Cheers,
we'll be back after the break to take more of your calls. 8223 0000.